Once upon a time, there were two friends, Teodoro and Matteo. They lived long, long ago in a small village in southern Italy. Their friendship was known throughout that small village. Why? Because they were more like brothers than friends. They were born in the same house. Their parents lived across the landing from each other. Those boys, they learned to crawl at the same time, they learned to walk at the same time, talk at the same time. When it was time to go off to the local school, they went holding each other's hands. Everybody knew about this love between these two friends. They even sneaked off one day and made an incision in each other's finger, pressed their index fingers together and declared each other blood brothers. When they became men, Teodoro became a baker, Matteo, he became a chef. And both friends had made a pact. If one should marry before the other, then the one who was still waiting for a bride would be best man for the one who was to be married. I would gladly do that for you, said Teodoro. And I for you, said Matteo. And life went on. Every day after shutting up his shop, Teodoro would go across to the restaurant. He always supplied the bread for the restaurant, and so he was allowed to have free meals there. So he would sit and eat his friend's food, which was always good. And when all the guests had gone, they would sit together over a bottle of wine and talk about that and this and this and that. And it was in the restaurant that Teodoro first saw Francesca. Oh, what a pearl. She was beautiful. Beautiful dark ebony hair that came down over her shoulders. Beautiful big green eyes, full lips, a smile that would take your breath away. And it did. It took Teodoro's breath away. And as she left the restaurant and he and his friends sat at the table drinking the wine, he said, "Who was that?" "Ah, that's my friend Francesca." "How have you never told me about her before?" "Oh, you're always falling in love," said Matteo. No, this is different," said Teodoro. "Look," he said. "The hairs have stood up on the back of my heart almost stopped when I saw her. She took my breath away. Introduce us." So the next day, Matteo introduced Francesca to Teodoro. And that's how the courting began. A few words, a few more words, long walks. This went from days to weeks to months to a year of courting. And at the end of that year, Teodoro had bought a ring. Teodoro went down on one knee and he asked the question, to which the answer was yes. He was so happy, he ran to his friend's restaurant. He almost picked him up and swung him around. "What's wrong with you?" said Matteo. "I asked the question." "Really?" "Yes." And she said, "Yes. And you promised to be my best man." "Don't worry, I'll be there," said Matteo. Now what nobody knew was that Matteo really wasn't feeling himself. Started off feeling a bit dizzy. And then these headaches. Sometimes just a quick one day. Sometimes days on end his head would hurt. But he would go into the restaurant and he would cook. He started to look a little paler, a little weaker. The dizzy spells became more and more frequently. And his mother would look at him when he came home and she'd say, "What's wrong with you? You don't look yourself." "Oh, it's nothing," he would say. But you know mothers, they prod, they question, they cajole, and he was determined not to tell anyone about his suffering. And when the prodding, the cajoling, and the questioning didn't work, she started crying. "All right, Mama," he said, "I'll tell you." And he told her, and she immediately went to work, cooking up the remedies that her grandmother had taught her for any ailment. This ailment she could work with. But nothing worked. Nothing worked. She couldn't cure her son. And so she took him to the doctor. He didn't know what was wrong. They scraped money together and sent him to the city. The city doctors didn't know what to do. And so he came home. And he tried to continue working. But it was no good. He was too weak. There were days when he couldn't go to the restaurant. He had to stay at home. And on those days, when Teodoro shut the shop, he would go home and he would visit his friend. He became weaker and weaker. So much so that he had to stay in his bed. And Teodoro would sit at the bedside. "Now, you promised," he would say. "You promised to stand next to me at my wedding." "And I will," said Matteo. "I'll get better, don't worry." But he didn't. And it was with grief, a deep grief, that Teodoro received the news from Matteo's mother that she'd gone in to rouse her son and she couldn't wake him, and that he'd slipped away. At the graveside, Teodoro was inconsolable. Matteo's parents had to leave off their grief and come and console him. Francesca, his own parents, Matteo's parents, all held him in his grief. Days, weeks, he grieved, until finally his father came and he said, "My son, I know this hurts, but you know, life is for the living. Your friend is gone. There's nothing you can do about that. But look to the future. All the love you had for your friend, pour it into your love for Francesca. Pour it into your wedding. Please, my son, leave off from this now. Life is for the living." Teodoro listened to his father, and some days later, he seemed to shake off this grief and put all his energy into the wedding. On the night before the wedding, he went to his friend's grave. He went there every day, but on this day he said, "My friend, you will be missed more than ever tomorrow. I had to ask someone else to be my best man. You promised. Send me your blessings from heaven." And then he left. The next morning, the bride's family were on one side, the groom's family were on the other side. Francesca was standing beside Teodoro, looking beautiful. The priest was saying the words, "If anyone knows any reason why this marriage should not continue, please speak now." And then the doors opened at the back of the church. There was a gasp. Was there going to be a declaration? But no. Instead, who did they see walking along the parquet floor towards the altar? Matteo. Matteo, who they'd buried some months before. Matteo, dressed in white. Matteo, looking more healthy than anyone in the room, apart from the bride and the groom. People gasped again as he walked and stood next to his friend and gently invited the standing best man to sit down. He took the ring and he waited until the requisite time. When the ring was asked for, he passed it to his friend and he smiled, a shining smile. Teodoro's mouth fell open. Francesca's mouth fell open. You can imagine Matteo's parents, how they felt. The wedding was performed. The vows were exchanged. The bride was kissed. And everybody started to leave the church. Everybody ran to Matteo. "Matteo, Matteo, how is it possible that you're alive? We buried you." His mother, she held him, she kissed him. "Oh, my son, my son. Tell me, what is it like in paradise? Do you ever look into the face of him?" "Mama," he said, "people, I didn't come to discuss this. I came to celebrate my friend's wedding. Let's go, let's eat." They all went to the restaurant. They sat, they ate. Everybody kept gazing at Matteo. Matteo spoke with his friend. And then, as the celebration started to wane, he stood up. He went over to Francesca. He kissed her on the cheek. He told her how beautiful she was, and he knew that she would make his friend happy. And he went to Teodoro and he said, "I have to leave." "I'll walk with you," said Teodoro. "Francesca, I'm going to walk with Matteo. I'll be back soon." And they walked. "Where are we going?" "To my grave." "Oh, of course," he said. "So tell me, I know you wouldn't want to tell anyone in there, but tell me, what's it like in paradise?" He said, it's the most amazing place. You know, they don't have rivers of water, they have rivers of red wine. The food, ready cooked, grows on trees. As a chef, I'm amazed. There are dukes and duchesses, kings, queens, paupers. Everyone is on an equal level in heaven. But do you know, the best part is in the evenings for entertainment. St. Peter plays the double bass and the angels, they sing for us. "Really?" said Teodoro. "Could I see?" "No, my friend. Paradise is good for those who are dead. You're alive and your bride is waiting. Oh, please, let me just come. I need to see. I want to see St. Peter playing the double bass." "Because you're my friend and against my better judgment, come on." "Yes," said Teodoro. And together they walked down into the grave of Matteo. On the other side of that grave, a bright light. And when his eyes became adjusted to the light, what did he see? Rivers of wine, cooked food hanging from branches of trees. Duchesses and dukes and kings, queens, paupers, everyone equal in heaven. Angels singing beautiful melodies with beautiful harmonies, and St. Peter playing the double bass. "This is beautiful," said Teodoro. "Yes, it's beautiful," said Matteo, "but now you have to leave. Francesca is waiting." "Yes, of course," he said. The friends embraced. "It was so good to see you again, my friend." "And you too," said Matteo. He escorted him back to where he came from. But something was odd. When Teodoro found himself standing in the graveyard, he didn't recognise any of the graves. He certainly didn't recognise Matteo's grave. It was covered in moss and lichen, and it was as though no one had visited the grave for a long time, but it had only recently been buried. And then he heard a terrible noise. He looked up, and there was a great metal bird flying in the sky. And there was some white stuff trailing behind the metal bird. And then he saw carriages, it seemed, belching out black smoke. And so many people, and something that we would know as a highway. He didn't understand. He was confused. He tried to find the restaurant. He couldn't find it. He tried to find his bakery. He couldn't find it. He was in a tailspin of confusion and panic. The safe place that he knew in his village was the church. And so he ran to the church where he'd married, the church where he'd seen his friend, the church where his friend had been buried. But when he got there, there was no church. There was a huge, sprawling cathedral. What? I don't understand. He pounded on the door of the cathedral. Let me in, let me in. And the door opened, and there was the sexton. He said, what's the matter? Come inside. The sexton, he was dressed very strangely for the time. 19th century clothing. He didn't understand. Why would anyone be dressed like that today? Come in, he said. You have to help me, said Teodoro. You have to help me. I don't know what's happened. And he told him the story. Told him the story of Matteo coming to be his best man and kissing his bride on the cheek and making his way to see his friend off. And then he expected to come back and find his bride, but everything was so different. What are those metal birds in the sky, he said, and those carriages that belch out black smoke? And where is my church and where is my bride? Oh, your name? Teodoro told him his name. Oh, but there are stories told of this. What do you mean, said Teodoro? There are stories told of this. Come with me. And he took him. He took him to the computer. And he searched and searched and searched and searched until he clicked on the story of the bride who was jilted at the altar, jilted on her wedding night by her husband, who had claimed that he'd gone off to say goodbye to his friend and was never seen again. And the reason the story was told was because of this thing that was in the story and was now coming out of Teodoro's mouth, that his friend had come back from the dead to be his best man. Are you an actor? Said the sexton. No! This is my life. This is my story. And what does it say of my bride, Francesca? And he scrolled and he scrolled. Apparently she never married again and died of grief, and she was the one who told this story. When Teodoro heard that, his heart did stop. His breath did stop. He fell to the ground. And as far as I know, he, Francesca, and Matteo, they're in heaven, drinking wine from the river, eating ready-cooked food from the trees, and listening to St. Peter playing the double bass. That is the end of my story. Thank you for listening.